My name is Jason Murphy. This is the Wednesday night Against the Stream meditation group. Glad you're all here. Let's just start with, is there anyone either online or in the room that's here for the first time that is willing to introduce themselves? And if you're online, you can just kind of raise your blue hand, raise the Smurf hand, All right, looks like we have I actually know that there's one person that's here for the first time. What was your name again?
Belle.
Belle, yeah. Welcome. Thanks. And have you done any kind of meditation before? Have you been in meditation groups and whatnot before?
Not for a long time, but yeah.
Okay, all right, great.
And my name's David. I don't see the blue hand you're talking about, but I'm in Park City, Utah, and I'm here for the first time, Jason.
Okay, welcome, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, the blue hand is in your, if you click on participants, you can, it says raise hand or lower hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It took me like a month to figure that out. And so welcome, David. Welcome, Belle. And welcome to the rest of you, because we're all here for the first time, right? This is, this day could be, it's brand new. Everything's different. Even though it seems like there's this thread of, it seems like yesterday it all kind of blends together. It's actually, if we really pay attention, there's lots of nuance. Perhaps it's one of the reasons that we get lost in suffering, is that there's, it all seems the same. We don't notice the impermanent nature of things. Anyway. Yeah, I was thinking as far as meditation tonight, we're going to sit for a 30-minute meditation. And, I was just reflecting before the group. There's been quite a bit of loss that has come up this week. Not necessarily for me personally, but people kind of I'm just aware that there's loss. A young man in Malibu actually OD'd just the other day based on depression, was taking opiates and opiate pills and OD'd and died, 19. And his name was Arthur. And then just a few people also whose parents have gotten COVID in the last, that I know and that I work with. And it just kind of allowed me to kind of reflect on, just that there's these waves and waves of pain and loss and separation that's been taking place. And so I figured what better to do than some compassion meditation for the practice tonight. So we'll work with that. Do you see the bell ringer? Yeah. Thanks. All right, so just finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable. And actually, during heart practices, loving kindness, compassion, forgiveness, any of these type of heart opening practices, it's suggested to sit in a way that is actually that you're comfortable. So you don't have to necessarily sit in a cross-legged position, or, those of you at home, I'm not sure what your situation is, but, feel free to lie down if you're in the room here. Feel free to lie down if you'd like, or just sit in whatever way makes you comfortable. If there's enough pain in life, we don't need to add more to be compassionate about, right? All right. So it's helpful to allow the eyes to close. Finding that breath. the experience of breathing, opening to the comings and goings of sound. Sounds outside the room. Sounds inside the room. Good hearing the bell. We'll just take a few moments. See if we can just breathe here, arriving here. This sitting, breathing body. And in some way, seeing if we can begin to turn the attention toward what we call the heart space or your center. Some traditions and teachers call it the emotional body. So just seeing if you can kind of connect in to this place of original goodness, this wholesome desire for happiness and well-being within each of us. Sometimes it can be useful to imagine like an ember or some kind of a gem that with each breath glows a little brighter. Within each heart, each mind. So it's said that the appropriate response to suffering is the heart of compassion or a compassionate understanding. So taking a few moments and, perhaps search your mind for those, close to you, maybe friends, family, friends of friends, people who perhaps you can envision in your mind, in your heart, and may be struggling, and may be suffering in some way. Perhaps due to COVID or not working or family, medical issues, the myriad of reasons that we struggle, the many ways in which we experience pain in this life. Just seeing if you can bring them to mind. So as we begin to send these wishes of care and compassion, the traditional phrases are to use the word pain and sorrow. But I want to invite you to use whatever words fit for you. Maybe it's suffering or sadness or loss, illness. So just seeing if you can extend. And how do we do this? By repeating some simple phrase from your heart to theirs. May you be free from pain and sorrow. May you be free from pain and sorrow. Extending that out. Perhaps even saying their name. May you be free. Zach. From pain and sorrow. I care about your pain. I care about this suffering. May you hold your pain with compassion. May you hold your pain with compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May your pain and sorrow be eased. And if you can, returning again and again to the image of this person or these people struggling or going through some type of pain or loss, illness. I care about your pain. May this suffering be a doorway to freedom. Again and again, seeing if we can stay connected to our own hearts, to this sincere wish for those who are experiencing suffering. I care about your suffering. And then, in the same way that we extend this feeling, this intention, this wish for care, for compassion, towards the suffering of others, knowing that we too suffer. We too experience pain and grief and loss. So beginning to turn these wishes of care and compassion towards our own hearts, towards our own minds, towards our own pain, our own pain. May I care about my own pain. Perhaps if that feels hard, you can add the word learn. May I learn to care about my own pain, my own sorrow, the suffering that I experience in this life. May I hold this pain with compassion. May I hold this pain with compassion. May my own pain and sorrow be eased. Sometimes it can be helpful to place a hand over the heart center, or even one on the heart, one on the belly, just to feel that contact of care. Up to you. May I learn to care about my own pain and sorrow. May I meet this suffering with mercy. May I hold this pain with compassion over and over. May this suffering be eased. May I find ease amongst this pain. This sorrow, this fear, this loss, this sadness. Can I soften the walls around my own pain? May I learn to attend to the wounds of this heart, this mind. Each breath, each moment, allowing this glow of compassion to burn more brightly, to spread throughout the body. May this suffering be a doorway to freedom. And if we can, to begin to extend out from our own hearts, our own minds, to those known and unknown to us. Perhaps the room you're in, the home, the house, the building, the town, extending out in all directions. May all beings learn to care for their pain and sorrow. Feeling this compassionate energy moving beyond your own body plane, extending out in all directions. The city, the country, the world. The earth itself, suffering. The animals, the oceans, all beings. All those who have experienced loss, all those who are experiencing sadness or fear or loneliness, separation. With each exhale, can we extend further this care of compassion? May we all hold our pain with compassion. May this suffering be a doorway to freedom. And may all beings everywhere be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And just take a moment to not only include yourself, but also receive these wishes of compassion and care. Knowing that every day, all over the world, millions of monks and nuns, meditators are sending these wishes of care and compassion to your heart. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all be free. May my foot be free of the pain that it is currently in. All right. Well, for some of you, that may have been different. And the invitation is to just reflect for a few moments. So we'll just kind of reflecting for yourself. What was happening with that experience? Was there a challenge? Was there negativity in the mind? Was there a, I don't deserve this compassion, or I deserve it more than anyone else? Just to reflect. Just to ask yourself, what happened? Not that there's anything wrong with whatever happened. Yeah. This heart practices are known as a purification practice. And in some ways, I think harder than mindfulness or vipassana or concentration, because there's this emotional content. Yeah, at least it was for me. Harder to access, but also very, the word is purifying, is what they call this practice. All of these practices really purify the heart and mind, relieving the wounds of the mind. There's this this teaching where the Buddha was looking out over a group of meditators, practitioners, and he was saying, and he would say, I could see the splinter of suffering in all of your minds, but I can't remove it for you. That work you must do on your own. And I just always found that to be, one, just totally honest. Like, I can see it, you can see suffering in others, in somebody else. You can, and sometimes if we're tuned in enough, we can actually see our own suffering. But most of the time, what are we trying to do? Avoid it like the plague, right? Zip in and dodge in, and, our own sorrow, our own inner critic, the hatred, whatever it is, the judgment, the prejudice. There's so many layers of, what the Buddha would call akusala, which is unskillful mind states, that we just like absorb throughout our life. And for many of us, I don't know about you, but for many of us and many of the people that I've worked with, then we often avoid that experience happen or repress it, so that it just kind of gets stuck. And so what does this practice do? It's this idea of softening, opening, and not, we don't have to rip the doors open. We don't have to rip the walls down from the heart. There's, for me, this has been it's a gradual process. Noah's father wrote his first book in the year I was born, too, 1971. And it's called The Gradual Awakening. And it's actually the first book that I ever read, first Buddhist book I ever read. And it's a great book. So if you have a chance, A Gradual Awakening, just very, very useful practices, most of which are the practices that Noah teaches, that I teach. This concept of kind of soft belly, and this balance between alert and relaxed, noting in the mind. Anyway, this term, this is a gradual awakening, is also a warning. We don't need to rush to relief, and sometimes we'll get relief, but if we're really like, no, this has to be gone now, right? What's that? It's aversion. It's a feeling. It's a avoidance. All right. So reflecting, questions about that particular practice, things that came up for you. We got a question. Hi, Rick. A bit of a dilemma, perhaps. If suffering is a crucial component to compassion, would it ever be appropriate to wish that a person totally lacking in compassion experience more suffering so that their compassion might grow? Actually, there is. There's a practice in the Tibetan, in Vajrayana, and it's a little bit like keep coming back. It's this, like, may you have the statement, the wish, the prayer, whatever you want to call it, is may you have the appropriate amount of suffering that you'll awaken. May you have the appropriate amount of suffering. It's not so much to wish folks suffering, but that they'll experience it, that they'll actually come into contact. Yeah. I mean, you're welcome. The other thing, like totally lacking in compassion, in my view, well, first of all, just compassion is a skill. It's not innate. It's not innate. Greed, hatred, delusion, innate. And, that which we fuel, that which we feed, that which we plant, we sow, right? All of these kind of ways of talking about how how we're cultivating, what are we cultivating, and then the fruition of that. So compassion needs to be cultivated. Yes.
Now, isn't like love, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and all these things, don't they stem from love? Isn't that innate love? I mean, you're born with some people are born with the inability to have love and compassion. Kind of cold, and it wasn't subject from their life experience, but others are just naturally adapted to having that love and kindness.
That's what you believe. Yeah. And and you're probably right. And my feeling, so the question for those of you at home, he was like, well, isn't love innate? Isn't it something that we're born with and that we kind of naturally, I think we naturally develop it. I think if you're given love, then you learn to receive love. And if you're given hate, you learn to receive hate, and you learn to give love, or you learn to give hate. Same thing with compassion. I feel like compassion is this not turning away from suffering. Love and compassion, it's like different branches on the same tree, right? In my opinion, and from the Buddhist perspective as well. So it's a great point that you bring up. So if we have the capacity to love, that's natural, that we're born with, which I actually do believe. I do believe that just like there's greed, hatred, and delusion are things that we're also, like I was saying, we're also cultivating. We're also cultivating love and compassion and forgiveness throughout our lives, usually based on not nature, but nurture, right? So this idea that actually from a biological standpoint, we're actually born with none of it. Except if you look at it from the Buddhist perspective, we are born with the karma of our past actions. We are born into this world with the karma from our past actions. And so if you believe that schema, then that would say that if we lived this life in a way of developing kindness, love, compassion, then that would manifest as a certain kind of temperament. And just how you all know, and especially any of you who've been around children, or you have your own children, that there's certain temperaments that children have. And psychologically, there's actually some reasons why that is, but karmically, from a Buddhist perspective, that's one of the explanations or the ways that it's talked about, is that we're bringing our karma from past lives, last life, whatever you want to call it, or even just from as early as our own birth, the karma that we've absorbed, that we've that from our family. This is where I talk about it as nurturing. What we learn is what we do, right? Racism, no one is born with racism. No one on the planet is born with racism. Yet we learn it. We learn it, and for some, we cultivate it. It becomes cultivated, and for others, maybe it becomes rejected. So I feel like there's this. It's kind of like chicken egg, right? Like nurture, nature. But your point is, I like your point, and I'd like to believe that we have the innate capacity, maybe like the seed. This would maybe be a way to talk about it: the seed of love, the seed of compassion, the seed of forgiveness, right? And if we're not cultivating that throughout our lives, or if we're not nurtured in that way, then it doesn't flourish, and it can be more challenging. And for some people, compassion is very easy, actually. I think I don't know a lot of those people, but there are some. I mean, like, look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Buddha of compassion. I mean, that's his role, is to have compassion for the world. And so from the age, in the Tibetan kind of Vajrayana school, not only basically it was recognized that he was a reincarnation of the Buddha of compassion in the Tibetan tradition, which basically means a bodhisattva, someone who has, actually, I think that's what it was, the bodhisattva of compassion. And a bodhisattva is a being that has basically foregone or set aside his own attainment of nibbana or Buddhahood in order to engage in helping as many people as possible. And so there's this bodhisattva vow that is in what's in like Zen and different forms of Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism. And so here's His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who was maybe identified as being this person because there were certain qualities. I don't exactly know how it's done. There is a movie called The Little Buddha that I think is about that. Also has Chris Isaac in it. It's a pretty good movie, actually. Keanu Reeves plays the Buddha. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's actually, I thought he did a pretty good job. It's worth seeing. It's called The Little Buddha. It's like mid-90s. So the idea here is that there's some qualities that person, who we now know as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, was identified and then nurtured from 6-7 years old into studying and practicing and training and doing and being the person that he has become. And so, if I remember correctly, actually in His Holiness the Dalai Lama's book, The Art of Happiness, he actually wrote specifically that compassion is something that is nurtured, that is grown, that we have to nourish. So, but thank you for your comment. I'm glad that you brought it up. Yeah. What about others? What about other people? Or was there something else that I missed?
I was saying thank you for
Oh, yeah.
information.
I mean, I'm just a learner here too. I don't got all this shit figured out. As a matter of fact, compassion for me really, really challenging for many years, and I avoided all of these kind of heart practices because I just didn't. I wasn't like. This is why I was asking you to kind of reflect, because when I first of all, I was just so closed off. I just felt so. I had to protect my heart really, really young. Like I felt like I was super sensitive, 7 years old, something like that. And there was lots of, violence and struggle and pain and suffering, like everyone, to varying degrees. And there was and also maybe perhaps male conditioning, but there was some closing down that had to happen. And I believe that actually had to happen in order for me to kind of survive. Um, I was speaking with someone about this young man who OD'd not that long ago, a few weeks ago, or about a week ago now. And he was talking about how this person whose name is Arthur was like had a lot, that was like a very artistic person and very kind and very like lived really close to that kind of the edge of lives close to the edge of pain, like feeling the kind of like the palatableness of pain in our life, that he was, so he struggled with that. He struggled with depression. Yeah. So I didn't know this person personally, right? This is kind of through a friend, and I just felt like there was that, and then another, friend of mine whose mother is suffering, from COVID, and now it's like the family is dealing with this, and then just to kind of bring it real personal, my aunt, who is my last living relative, had a heart attack the other day and drove herself to the hospital. She drove 15 miles to the hospital and was, thought she was going to have like all this, like this surgery. And so in the last 2 years, my mother died. Both of my uncles died. A third uncle died a few years prior. So in my aunt is the last living relative of that generation, and she talked to me, and maybe if she hears this, sorry for talking about you, but it was inspiring. She they did all these tests. She was in the hospital for a few days, and then they said that they gave her some, it was like some, diagnosis that there was nothing actually wrong with her heart. It was fatigued. It was fatigued because of grief. So what she said to me, she said, I have broken heart syndrome. And my aunt and I are very close, and I talk with her as often as I can, and it's not always as often as I'd like, but it just really like hit me, that that's a thing. can't remember the specific kind of name for it, but it's like, you know, where there's an arrhythmia in the heart and it's not functioning properly, brought on by grief and loss and stuffing and holding and not letting go. You know, oh, I forgot to also mention that my aunt, the first wave of this for my aunt was that her husband of 45 years died of stomach cancer. And that kind of started the wave of then her uncle, then her brothers, and then my mother, and so on. And it just kind of like, so it's been a little bit, you know, kind of up for me this week. And also then just kind of expanding it out to, you know, we all, how do we hold on to our pain and why? What's the purpose of holding on to sorrow, holding on? And there, you might have some reasons. I have some ideas about why that is. And at what point does it become counterproductive, you know? Someone unmuted themselves.
It was me. I was thinking that it's almost the fear of pain that we hold on to it, which is just, when you think of that, and then that causes pain. It's like a backwards cycle. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems it's like it seems like counterintuitive. Like, why would you do that? And what I want to say, thank you. Who was that spoke up? I couldn't see. Severine?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your comment in the box. Yeah, I mean, I feel that's actually kind of where I was leaning to, because what I think that really all of the Buddhist teachings are pointed to, when you experience something, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, to experience it in that moment that it arises. Painful, pleasant, joyful, fucking terrifying, like, be here for it. And this is what all of the training is really pointing to. All of the present time experience is saying, don't lock onto it, because locking onto it causes suffering. And that then suffering on top of suffering on top of suffering on top of suffering causes heartache, causes, you know, what we call dukkha or kilesa, or the wounds of the mind, the splinter of suffering in the mind. There is a teaching. It's not from. It's like a later commentary that is really talking about healing the wounds of the mind, and that's the work of Buddhism. That's the work of the Dharma. That the Dharma is, and by mind I mean mind heart. That the Dharma is pointing again and again. And we could, we can get, like last week, I unpacked all of the, all of these different things, and, all of the Eightfold Path, and the, the khandhas, the, like, what makes up what we call a human being, what are the things that we cling to, and it was like I don't know why, I just kind of like decided to dump it all out. And I apologize if it was too much. But, that's one of the ways in which the Dharma is super expansive and beautiful, and we can get our head around pieces and get really intellectual about it. But the reality is, it is very simple and it is very deep. Be here with the experience that's arising mentally, emotionally, physically, allowing whatever that experience is, to fully express itself. Don't pull away from it. Don't cling to it. Just allow it to be what it is. Pain, it's pain. If it's joy, it's joy. Don't turn away from joy. How many people do you know turn away from joy, avoid feeling like extra happy? Is there anyone out there? Anyone in the room? I totally have. Someone said me. Me too. Not, and kind of like the same process that was just mentioned about, like, because it's like fear of pain, fear of joy going away prevents people from experiencing joy. Or fear, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think fear of, like, okay, if I'm happy now, like, I'm going to use up all the happiness, and then there won't be no more happiness. So I better like only experience a little bit of it, or not experience any at all. Or I'm so conditioned to hold on and cling to my suffering that I don't have any room for happiness or for joy. And so in some ways, that's, those of you who have listened to some of Noah's teachings, and, which is basically kind of a redirection of what the Buddhist teachings are, is to say that we do all of these practices to clear the way, to allow our own innate, okay, if you will, like, what remains if we remove all the suffering and all of the resistance. What remains is loving kindness. What remains is peace and ease. Now, so in that sense, I would say we've come full circle back to, I agree with what you said, that from most of the people that I've worked with, that's the natural resting place. Yet, when I say worked with, I mean most of the teachers that I've sat with, most of the people that I've kind of worked with in a teaching capacity. Yet we obscure that over and over and over with layers and layers and layers of avoidance, of pain that we don't want to look at, of repressed emotion, and layer and layer and layer and layer and layer. And I remember for myself, gosh, what was it, like 15 years old, I think. I was like 15. And I remember describing to my psychologist, who was also the first person to teach me meditation, that I felt like I was just like, there was hands pushing down all of my pain. And that was all that I had to, that's all that I could do, was push down pain as a protection, right? And that this practice has allowed layer after layer, kind of like I said earlier, with this compassion, the ability to turn toward that pain and just begin to experience it little bits at a time, has been freeing. May this suffering be a doorway to freedom. That to me was a very poignant insight that I had actually during a retreat. Not for the faint of heart. Ignorance is bliss, and you'll just keep suffering. So go ahead, enjoy yourself and suffer on. Or do the harder thing, which is to turn toward the splinter of suffering in our minds. I think there's someone either made a statement or a quote or something here that really resonates with me. Pushing down the pain. Yeah, I used to burst into tears for no reason. Yeah, we all do. Or we even stuff that down and don't let it out at all. Or drink, or use pills, You know, this kid that died the other day, opiates, used pills to numb the pain. So what can we do? The appropriate response to suffering. And I'm going to talk in a minute the difference between suffering and pain, because I've been using them a little bit interchangeably. But the appropriate response to suffering is always compassion. And what I did in our meditation is I kind of started out there. Did you notice that? I did that on purpose because sometimes it's easier to extend compassion to others. Right? Sometimes it's easier to extend, seeing the pain that other people are experiencing and having some compassion towards that. Sometimes that, I don't know, it just feels easier. For some people that I've talked to, that I work with, they talk about opening up to any compassion, they feel absolutely overwhelmed. They would start becoming super anxious about it, whether it's external or internal. But start where we can. And I wanted to say, before I talk about the difference between suffering and pain, I wanted to say kind of one last thing about that, is that this is a gradual awakening. And what you might have experienced is tons of resistance. You might have experienced shutting down. You might have not experienced this heart-opening, compassionate experience, like I feel compassion for all beings. Yeah, totally fine if you didn't, I've worked with some students that they would do this and their body would literally shut down. They would start to fall asleep. They would get sleepy, right? It's a hindrance. It's a protection. It also hinders us from really opening to alleviating the suffering in our lives. Thoughts, questions before I move forward? Yeah, Mike. What do you got?
It really resonates what you're saying because, I was raised to stuff everything down inside and, have the toughest possible exterior that I could have. And the majority of that was fronting. But some of it was real. And the old saying my father used to say was, the harder the exterior, the softer the interior. And I didn't realize what that meant until, much further along in my life. And now, being exposed to, the Dharma for a short amount of time and doing refuge recovery and more recently getting involved in therapy and digging in. I think compassion makes sense to me because everything else that I tried or the bad information I got from the street or being misinformed by the misinformed, it just didn't fucking work. It just didn't work. So opening my mind up to compassion, and fortunately, not because I'm like a Svengali or a guru or anything, I'm new to this and just, taking baby steps as I go. But I really, the Dalai Lama strikes a chord with me because you can just see in his baseline, his body language, and when he teaches compassion, it's just, it's very contagious. And the when I've used it and when I've, looked at my unskillful actions and like took in stock of it all and done compassion meditations, forgiveness meditation, just so much more. I think it's just better on every level. And what you're saying tonight really strikes a chord with me tonight. So Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. You made me think of a few things. I was just thinking about doing a compassion meditation tonight and then talking about the Four Noble Truths again, or, extending that. But the reality is that it's all the same. It's all the same. The Dharma is truth, the truth in nature. This is what the word Dharma means. It means truth in nature. And we are that nature. The truth, the reality that can be seen and experienced here and now. The Dalai Lama, I just want to, so I've had a few experiences with the guy, and, you can't understand half of what he says, right? But you don't need to, because you hear it with your heart. That's the difference about that person. And there's other teachers that are like that too. Thich Nhat Hanh, I think Ajahn Amaro, although you can hear him very clearly, and he's got a little bit of a snide kind of, he can be like kind of sarcastic in his humor, which I really like. And I think that's why Noah likes him too. Some of the Western monks. So I just want to tell this quick story. So in 1998, I went to this conference called The Power of Nonviolence. Peacemaking, the Power of Nonviolence. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama was a main attraction there. And I was privileged enough to actually have a moment. It was a group of us, a small group of this conference, that got to meet the Dalai Lama, kind of shake his hand, bow to him, get a blessing cord, and had just share a moment or two. And there was something changed in me in that day, in that weekend, but that day, something changed by having that kind of contact. And actually, I would actually even say, the first time of experiencing, it was like, for me, it was like maybe a little bit like like if someone saw the Beatles or something, or Sid Vicious, or I saw, yeah. I saw the Sex Pistols, or I saw the Clash in 77 or something like that. That's what it kind of felt like to me. There was this kind of opening. And I've had the privilege to not meet him, but be with several teachings, both here in the States and in Dharamsala, India. And yeah, there's something about the guy. Nature, nurture. I don't know, but there's definitely something about him. And like watching Thich Nhat Hanh walk. Just watching Thich Nhat Hanh walk. If you've never seen, there's some videos, and there's been some other teachers too, that just kind of being in their presence, you can feel a shift. For me, it was a hope. Like if this person can have as much peace and ease as they're experiencing, I might be able to have a fucking inkling of that. And that's worth keeping going, For me, that's what's been true. All right, I'm running out of time. It's really actually very simple. Pain, what fucking happens in life? Life is painful. It's also pleasant, and it's also neutral. But pain, pleasant, neutral are the experiences that are going to happen. Loss, all of the things that I kind of pointed to in the meditation, loss and fear and sadness and grief, and we're going to have relationships, we're going to fall in love, we're going to get our hearts broken, we're going to have maybe a job or money or a car, and we're going to crash that car, and we're going to have material things that are going to arise and pass away. And that's pain. Pain is that there's this kind of constant arising and passing away of things and feelings and relationships and, lives. That's pain. Unavoidable. Even the Buddha, after becoming fully enlightened, fully awakened, nothing but kindness and compassion and wisdom, still had pain, still had back pain. The guy sat in the forest and walked everywhere for 45 years after he achieved awakening. He didn't go sit on a throne, which is why I respect the dude, because he was still in the street, but still had physical pain and actually still experienced some grief when his cousins died, experiencing grief when he would hear about, his family being at war or being kind of taken over by the neighboring kind of, villages or kingdoms. He experienced grief, and he would experience it, and then it would move, and then he would find, and it would be resting in equanimity. Suffering is when we experience any of those things and then we grasp onto it, kind of like what was talked about earlier, when we take a grasp onto our pain. Why? Because we're afraid of what happens. And so for some of us, it's just like unskillful, like just, ignorance, right? That's what we call ignorance or confusion. I had a lot of confusion. I still do. I mean, I'm still pretty confused, actually, but I try to have an open heart with it today. But this, like, the confusion, I think the biggest delusion or confusion is that if we stuff down our pain, it's going to go away. Has anyone ever experienced that? Anyone? The reality is no, right? Even if it goes away for a time, and this is where, some of the, like, why I loved to smoke weed and drink booze and, do all kinds of things to numb my brain, to numb my heart, because it was a temporary, there was a temporary disappearance, or at least it would lessen for a time, right? And whether it's food, or whether it's, work, or whether it's, sex, or whether it's drugs, or whether it's whatever it is, that is our tendency. That's why greed is one of the top three, what are called the kilesas, the torments of mind, the causes of suffering. So pain, and then suffering. Suffering is when we don't experience the pain. Instead, we stuff it, we lock onto it, we hold onto it, we allow it to become who we are. I am this. I'm acting out of this pain. And then it builds and builds and builds. And then what happens is it spills over, and our suffering that we can know, because it's the pain that we can no longer contain, starts to spill out onto the rest of the world. And this is where we get that hate that spills out, right? All right, I think I have I'll open up for some more. If you have any questions about that. The Buddha didn't forget the struggle or the street. That's right. That is absolutely correct. He didn't. The Buddha stayed very close to, folks that were struggling, folks that were anyone that wanted to hear the teachings. And this is someone who was raised in privilege, rejected his privilege to find truth, because it was clear that greed and delusion at least were there, and probably There's probably hatred present as well. And then when he became fully awakened, yeah, this part of renunciation, I think the humility, and we don't need to be monks. I tried it. It's not for me, but I have a great respect for people who take on the mendicant role. But yeah, he was out there in the streets, helping lepers. He was into service work, radical, revolutionary. Just like Jesus. Jesus was like that too. Later, bastardized teachings became very popular. Modified version. All right, there's another haha. This is from Shannon. Haha, yes. Then I got committed, right? Because the dam broke. Yeah. As did my brain. Emotions are hard. They are hard. They're also fluid. How many emotions have you had today? Yeah, I don't know. A few. Okay. Any last in the room or in the Zoom or in the room? Any last kind of thoughts, comments, questions?
I have a question about, you were talking about stuffing pain, which I relate to. And my question is, it's so well stuffed that maybe I don't recognize it. So how do I bring it back out so I can heal it? Is there is it just meditation, or how do you summon it?
That is a beautiful question. Thanks for answering it. And I think, I actually feel like meditation, therapy, findings, there's lots of different modalities out there now. But yeah, if you haven't been on a meditation retreat, believe me, it'll rise to the surface. If we sit with ourselves long enough, it's going to come up. And that for some people is terrifying. I'm never going to sit a retreat. And for others, and it's not like we can't. Look, you have the capacity to deal with everything that's going on in your life. And, for some people, I want to just be clear, like some people need medication to help support that. But also, therapy, someone you trust to talk to, writing, meditation, finding some kind of movement practice, all of these different things, and there are several, like you could probably get just even a workbook on, what's it called? ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, getting a workbook around that. And there's lots of different ways. We could actually, you could actually reach out to me, Karen, and we could talk specifically if you'd like. So yeah, but just keep going, keep showing up here, keep going to the different groups, keep trying to have contact with your own heart. All right, folks. Michael put up in the, thank you, Michael, for doing that. I've nominated you to do that every week from now on. That againstthestream.com/donation, you can donate to this center, to Against the Stream, which we have a few people in the room. Thank you for doing that. Those of you who are here, you can donate at the bowl. Suggested donation $15. Of course, whatever you can afford is what you can afford, and even if that's zero, you're all still welcome. Let's just take a moment and gather all the goodness of our practice. All the goodness of our practice. May my practice be of benefit for all beings. May all beings find some release from suffering. May all beings be free. Even you, even me. Thanks, folks.